Welcome back to the Saturday edition of Locked On Women's Basketball, the internet's only women's basketball draft-focused podcast. Today, we're starting our yearly prospect-by-prospect scouting report series. First up, Ohio State guard Jacy Sheldon. Locked On Women's Basketball starts now.
Ogunbowale for the win. Good!
You are Locked On Women's Basketball, your daily podcast on women's basketball.
Welcome. You are Locked On Women's Basketball. Thanks for making us your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast and on YouTube. My name is Hunter Cruse. I'm your Saturday host covering the WNBA draft and prospect scouting. I'm joined by my co-hosts M. Adler and Lincoln Shafer. M covers the WNBA with a focus on player development and the game within the game. Lincoln is our biomechanics guru and contributes to our WNBA draft coverage at the Next. Before I throw it over to M and Lincoln, here's some background on Sheldon's statistical profile. At 5'10", so far this season, she's averaging 18 points, 3.4 rebounds, 2.9 assists while shooting 61% from two, very good, 35% from three, and 88% from the line on 3.9 attempts. She's also shooting 65% at the rim with a 3.5% steal rate. So for you, Lincoln, whenever you watch Sheldon, when you see what she can do in the offensive end, ideally, what is her offensive role for you when translating to the next level?
Yeah, I think she's definitely at her best as a combo guard. She has a lot of skills that she can showcase on and off the ball. So that's going to be a value add with the ball in her hands. But also, every year that she's played at Ohio State, that she hasn't been a victim of a catastrophic leg injury, she's shot 35 or 36% from three, which is absolutely good enough to make people guard you out there. And she's upped her attempts in her time there too. And her ability to attack closeouts and make plays with the ball in her hands is absolutely something that brings value both on and off the ball. I think that she's probably best in a situation where she's not asked to be the solo lead ball handler, but she can definitely operate on the ball and off the ball and bring value either way there.
She also, in terms of the shooting, is a good enough pull-up three-point shooter that you can't just auto-under on her in a way that, we've talked about the CLW before. So when it comes to that, they don't just have to respect her off the ball, but on the ball as well, and that opens up a lot in terms of the driving game. I think, importantly, we might have different definitions of what a combo guard is, because for me, a combo guard is someone who can lead the offense, but, you don't necessarily want leading the offense overall. Someone who can run a lot of pick and roll while involving the rest of the team, just, not like a point guard sense. To me, Sheldon is sort of your quintessential off-ball guard. She's not going to be running your offense. She's going to be a part of it. She's going to move the ball just fine. She's going to, get her own offense. She's going to be able to run a pick and roll and, make dump off passes, or I guess whatever the opposite of a dump off passes, and pick and pop. She's quite good at making those two player game passes. But yeah, I mean, I don't want her running full half court actions very often. And that's not for a lack of ability. Again, it's just that there's not a lot of playmaking process here, but what she doesn't have in playmaking process, she really makes up for in just extreme levels of rim pressure, the versatility there. There just aren't guards, especially at, she's not 6 foot, she's 5'10", but you wouldn't really know that, at least on the offensive end, with how she's able to, get downhill and force her will, all that kind of stuff. You just don't get guards who have this kind of rim pressure, especially not, in the WNBA. We have players like Gabby Williams. We have players like to a certain extent Skylar Diggins-Smith, who, in their game, a lot of it, Tiffany Hayes. Well, we had Tiffany Hayes, who, are able to get to the rim and are able to make offense at truly 3 levels, or 2 levels if the other one's 3. But in the women's game, for the most part, guards really struggle to get downhill to the rim. There's different aspects of it. It's just really more because of how the game is played than anything. But it is rare, unfortunately, to find, guards and backcourt players who are able to be threats from both 3 and the rim. The mid-range doesn't matter when we're talking about someone at sort of this level, and she's capable. We'll get to that. But it gives her a very unique ability, and it also just means she's a lot more efficient than players when we're and consistent when we're talking about players who, rely on the three in the mid-range and those jump shots to fall.
Yeah, with her, for me, I think, like you said, I don't want her running a half-court offense, but I think the transition stuff, what she can do in early offense, what she can do second side, I think these are the kind of things you're going to want to have her do offensively. Like, she's ranking in the 98th percentile at a pick and roll, but a lot of that is what she does scoring for herself rather than making high-level passing reads. So overall, where are you guys at on the shooting ability? I think we've seen it's been up and down. I mean, she hasn't really shot that well over the last month, but she's been a 35% shooter this year, 26% last year, and she's been around 34, 35 in the years before that.
Right. When she's not hurt, when she's had healthy seasons, it's been at that 35, 36% mark, which is perfectly reasonable for someone with her ability getting downhill and scoring at the rim. She's taken about like 39% to 45% of her shots at the rim, which is a pretty solid number. And she scores at a very high rate at the rim. She gets a lot of free throws, and she makes free throws. So I think that she's a good enough shooter to make you respect her on the outside, which is going to open up so much more for her game getting downhill.
Yeah, the WNBA is in a funny place when it comes to this, right? So really, in like a game-to-game sense, there's not much difference between the WNBA having like what you would call an average shooter, someone who could make a bunch of threes at like 34% versus the men's side, where it's somehow up to like 37.5%, almost 38%, I think, at this point. Again, in a game-to-game basis, that's a point here, a point there, but it really matters for the baseline here. So when we talk about, Jacy Sheldon being a 35% shooter, again, that includes a decent number of pull-up attempts. That's, not just her open three-point rate, her open three-point shooting percentages have tended to hover around 38 when she's healthy, which is good for women's basketball. It's not great. It's also not average in the way that would be on the men's side, even just perfectly mediocre adequate as that would be. So I think it's interesting in that sense. In terms of the shot distribution, she's really smart attacking closeouts. So when she's off the ball and handling those possessions, I think it's easy to trust her to make the right decision when it comes to shooting or driving, when it comes to passing out of things. And, she is someone who, when it comes to that kind of shot, it's a really consistent form. It's a bit of a long motion. It's like it's sort of like a two motion catch and shoot form. But again, it's smooth, it's consistent, it's repeatable, and she's good enough with it that I think, you can just kind of set it and forget it as far as your second side, just your second side guard, attacking closeouts, even one pass away. And I think in that sense, you'll see it in her shot distribution that it's not a huge 3-point attempt rate, but it doesn't need to be. We've seen how efficient she is as a scorer. Like Lincoln mentioned, both being a good finisher and being very good at drawing fouls. Those are two things that really do translate to the league in the way that she tends to get them.
All right, so after the break, we'll get into the defensive portion of our scouting report on Sheldon, and we'll also talk about team fits for her with the draft coming up. Here's a word from our sponsor, eBay Motors. eBay Motors has teamed up with Locked On Fantasy Basketball host Josh Lowe to bring you some of the best fantasy picks each week all season long. Whether you're prepping for a daily draft or scouting the waiver wire, every week we're going to provide you players that are guaranteed to fit on your roster. So let's see who Josh has picked for us on this week's eBay Guaranteed Fit Fantasy Picks of the Week. One player Josh is looking at is Hornets rookie wing Brandon Miller. Miller has seen a big uptick in usage with Terry Rozier shipped out, and that makes him a must roster player in fantasy. Josh Lloyd, Locked On Fantasy Basketball, is going to help you win your fantasy championship, and eBay Motors knows a championship team is about each player being a perfect fit. Same with your vehicle. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you can make your ride stays running smoothly, brake kits, LED lights, roof rack, bumpers, whatever it needs. eBay Motors has it, and with eBay Motors Guaranteed Fit, it's guaranteed to fit your ride for the first time, every time, or your money back. Plus, at the right price, you're burning rubber, not cash. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. eBay Motors Guaranteed Fit, only available in U.S. customers. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. I'm your host, Hunter Cruse, and before we get back into our conversation on Jacy Sheldon, I want to inform you that Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day, with local experts only Locked On can provide. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. All right. So like I mentioned earlier, Jacy Sheldon has been getting steals. Like, that has been her thing. Before the injury last season, what was the steal number at? Like, at the beginning of last season, she had like 20 steals, I feel like.
Why ask me? Do I look like Basketball Reference to you?
Her first segment of the season last year, she averaged 6 steals per game before
Yeah.
she
And
went back with an injury. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Lincoln is actually Basketball Reference.
I had it in my notes.
Oh. You see, if
So
I
what do you-
wasn't, if I wasn't trying to be funny for our loyal viewers, that would have actually been a good segment.
How do you guys project the defense? Because with Ohio State, we've talked about it before, with how they press. They don't run a traditional defensive scheme that you see with WNBA teams.
Yes, but if you think about it, their offense has been significantly worse this year, so it's meant she's had to do normal defense more.
That is true.
The synergy of basketball. No, I mean, I think the important thing that we've talked about before, I've written before a few times, one of the called shots that I will keep going back on repeatedly is she used to be an absolutely awful defender. Both of her underclassmen years were pretty bad. Her junior year was not particularly good either, as far as on the defensive end, but she had a lot of physical tools and instincts and reads that I think made it pretty clear that she was just very projectable defensively. And that really just exploded into consciousness and exploded into being manifested last year, as Lincoln said, with the steals were sort of indicative of part of that. But even just in the half court, her ability to be a really good guard defender, as far as sticking with drivers, as far as providing pretty plus help defense for someone who's probably at the 2 guard spot. I think you're not going to find a lot of guards who provide her level of offense and can provide her level of defense against guards. And again, I think it's very much a sort of set it and forget it. She's I don't want to say adept, but she's very capable of screen navigation. I think in a way that when you look at guards who you're going to ask to run a certain level of usage and scoring on offense, they usually suck at it in this league. Also in the men's league, really.
Yeah, she's I don't know if we have her exact wingspan number, but she plays long. That sounds weird. She plays kind of big for her listed size at 5'10". She's, as indicated by her steal numbers, she's first in the Big Ten in steals this year and second in steals per game. She's really good at getting in the passing lane. She has good hands. And I think she does a really good job of using her length and using her speed to stay with drivers, to recover, and just be kind of a pest defensively. And she's been a solid defender for the last 2 years now, at least.
Even, more than anything about offense, more than anything we've just talked about, is, at her size, she's so athletic, like we talked about on the offensive end. I think you can't really overstate how absolutely insane her lateral athleticism is. And just her burst, her change of direction is genuinely unbelievable. And the things she's able to do physically. But part of that comes from being lean. And, she's not like a Charlize Sledger-Walker, where, not that Charlize Sledger-Walker is particularly good defensively, but like CL Dub is about as good defending ones as she is, larger 2s and smaller 3s. For Jacy, I don't know how much you want her to switch. The size is an issue. Not that you, especially in the W, want to be running switching schemes a lot, but you have to switch at some points. That's just how a pick and roll runs. That's how closeouts and X-outs work. You have to make switching work to make good team defense work. And they ran into trouble with this against like the likes of Michigan this year. They ran into trouble with this with USC in the beginning of the season. She just does not have the strength to really bang it down low against larger players who can take her to the rack, either finish through her. She's not going to foul them often, but they can finish through her, or they can post her up on a switch if need be. These I think are, and Lincoln, Hunter, you guys can back me up or go contrary on this, but I think in the grand scheme of things, these are very minor concerns, but they are ones which I guess can make the difference in ranking. I think these are probably things that I think these are things that some scouts probably are going to value more than we do.
Yeah, I think the strength thing was something I was going to mention. In general, that limits what she can do from a versatility standpoint. Just being able to kind of switch down to threes, some threes, some fours. You really can't bank on any of that right now. So I think overall, though, there's a lot of the bankable skills that you look for. There's shooting. There's good defensive skills, good defensive instincts, elite rim pressure, which is one of the most valuable skills to me. It's just easy shots at the rim. So I think in general, I don't have a ton of concerns. And if our biggest concern is how she's going to hold up from a strength standpoint, I think that's okay. I think you can get stronger over time. I think that's something that teams can build into their infrastructure from a player development standpoint. So I think in general, she's always going to be a lean player, just in general with how she leverages her athleticism, but not too worried, I think, long term.
Do you think that makes a difference on the offensive end when we get in terms of, more athletic and better defensive twos in terms of being able to, like finish around them? Like, let's say like a Jordan Canada, who's very fast. She's on the extreme end. She's one of the maybe like 3 best guard defenders in the league. But, when you're going up against someone with, her level of lateral athleticism and strength, maybe Ka, are you worried about the ability to still be as good finishing around them and getting by them?
I don't think I'm tremendously worried. I think she does a really good job of getting her front shoulder past her defender on her drives. She is really good at getting low, getting like around defenders rather than through. So she does a really good job with her shoulders, with her front foot, with her burst to create good looks at the rim. So I think I'm not entirely. I don't think that's going to be a deal breaking thing for me on Jacy as a prospect, really, at all.
All right, so after the break, we'll get into team fits. Where do we project her in the whole scale of the draft and more? When it comes to writing, Grammarly is there for you to support you from start to finish. For over 10 years, Grammarly has been powered by AI technology you can trust to help you across all the places you can write the most. And now Grammarly helps you do even more. With one click, you can easily brainstorm, rewrite, and reply with suggestions based on your content and goals. So now you can improve productivity for you and your teams. Big presentation coming up. Let Grammarly create a personalized outline to get you organized so you can transform your ideas into a compelling presentation. You draft an important email and don't know where to start? Grammarly has suggestions to jumpstart your writing. The best part is that it's free to use. Go to Grammarly.com/podcast to download for free today. That's Grammarly.com/podcast to download for free. All right, so let's get into where we project her in the whole scale of this draft. For you, Em, where do you have her currently ranked for you at this moment in time?
It's tough, right? Because I was actually going to ask you guys about this in sort of a different sense, just because, I think she's clearly in a tier for us with Aaliyah Edwards and possibly Camila Cardoso. Maybe if we talk about, value within the sort of scarcity of point guard in the W, maybe in the same tier with Charlize Ledger-Walker, you could argue. But I wonder about the gap between her floor and her ceiling, right? So I think what's been pretty clear is from this episode, from the past 20 minutes, that, we believe there's a really high floor here. It's very hard to envision her, obviously barring injury, it's very hard to envision her not making, at least like the top 8 of a rotation of some team as sort of like a long-term fit, right? I don't know what the high end of that is. Do we see her making any all-star games? Do we see her, possibly getting to that level? It's hard to find the balance there. And I think for me, it's sort of hard to rank her linearly among Aaliyah Edwards, Cardoso, maybe CLW. But, I think within that, I think it's a pretty clear sort of 45-50 OFP on the roll grade. And I think it's pretty much what it's been since last year.
And for people that aren't aware, what does a 45 to 50 mean?
Right. So on the 2080 scouting grade scale, a 45 is a quality starter on a on a sort of a second division team, think a team that sneaks into the playoffs. And a 50 is the sort of baseline level of a starter on a true title contender.
And with her floor, though, I think if you talk about if it doesn't go right, it'll just have to be the strength. Like if she just can't hold up, and if she doesn't shoot, like if there's just a drop off shooting wise, if she's shooting like 30% from three, that probably makes her like a 30. But even then, I think she could maybe squeeze a little bit higher, depending on the year in general. What about you, Lincoln?
Yeah, I think she's gonna fall into the same tier for me in that high 45, low 50 range. I think she's absolutely good enough to be a starter on a championship level team. Is she the best or second best player on one of those teams? Probably not, but she's absolutely going to bring value to playoff caliber teams in her career to me. Just a very fun athlete, which I think for us in this draft, that puts her in the mid to late first round, which is it's a deep draft. There's a lot of skilled players in this draft, and she's absolutely one of those.
Mid to late? You can think of
it depends on.
You can think of like 7 or 8 players you'd take before her.
Well, we had her ranked 8th in our preseason rankings,
and I think we're definitely, and I mean, I think we've all sort of gotten a little bit lower on the person who was 6.
Which, yeah, that's fair. It depends on how you categorize mid to late in a 12 pick draft.
I think late is the last 4 picks of the first round.
Cool.
And what are your dream team fits for Sheldon in this draft?
Did somebody say the dream? Hunter, I know you would love it on the dream.
See, the problem with the dream is I think you run into the same issues with some of their other players, like where you have elite rim pressure guards that don't pass like a ton or add value passing. That's kind of what the dream already have.
Yeah, I mean, I think I largely agree with that.
My number one fit that I wrote down is wherever Jordan Canada ends up. I think that would be a really fun and interesting backcourt duo with
That would be fun.
high-level defense, a lot of burst, and the ability to kind of run pick and rolls, have the other one on the weak side. That could be really interesting and really fun, and just a terrifying defensive backcourt.
Yeah, I mean, I think when we look at the draft, we look at the order, given expecting Paige to go back, given Brink probably coming out again, but Edwards may be coming out probably, but not sure. Expecting Cardoso to come out, expecting CLW to come out, expecting Papao to return. You know, given all these sort of factors going in, I think we could see her going really anywhere in the back into the lottery to mid first range, just given how teams prioritize different available options. But I think it's really hard, given what we know about the league and what general managers and what scouts think of some of these prospects, especially with Sheldon. I think it's really hard to see her slipping past Minnesota at 7, Atlanta at 8, right? I think even getting to Atlanta at 8 to me would be very surprising. I think I'd be a little surprised to see her go 4 to Seattle, but I mean, that's a positional need, and that's also a team that is a fan of this archetype. And I think, Seattle, Dallas, Washington, Minnesota, I think that's like a 4-team spin right there, who all of them could use this type. To varying degrees, of course. And all of them have the roster spots open, and all of them like players in this mold for one reason or another. Some for better reasons, some for less good reasons. Hunter, where are you at on that?
Yeah.
So what's your grade on her?
My grade on her, I have her at like a 50-45 range as well. I think that's kind of just a bankable range for her. I don't see any way she's higher than like a 55. In terms of high-end outcome, I think there's maybe a chance of it a 60 if she's shooting 40% from 3. She's one of the best rim pressure guards. The defense translates. For that, I think there's just a lot of different teams that could use this skill set, like we talked about before. Rim pressure, defense, shooting, just a combination of that, I think, is really bankable skill set for someone like Jacy Sheldon. I think in this draft, I'm probably taking her skill set over a lot of players where, like I think we have like Pow Pow. I think I'm taking Sheldon over Pow Pow. I'm taking Sheldon over Amor. Like these other guard prospects, I'm just banking on the size and the other skills that are there.
Yeah, and I think we mentioned with Pow Pow is a good one because with her, we know her offense is going to be great just given the shooting and the consistency, and also not running a whole lot of straightforward lead pick and roll at South Carolina. But we know from her time at Oregon she's a standout pick and roll operator. So the offense there's probably better, even if it's not as unique. But just the massive defensive gap, or gulf, I should say, between her and Sheldon, I think, is sort of where we're at on this and why we put her that high. Some of the comps we have for her were, the current comp was like a Dejanay Carrington with more sort of like self-creation. Dejanay, I think, last year down the stretch was, I think, pretty clearly something like a 45. And you build off of that, and that's exactly what you get with Jacy Sheldon. Sort of like a shorter and less strong Ka herself was a 7. I think you back up from there, you get to 55. And that's what we had as her ceiling. This is the floor we had Kennedy Carter, and you can go in different ways with Kennedy Carter, but if you imagine Carter with a little better help defensive instincts, and again, you're back up to a 45 or even a 50. And I think it just all sort of points in the same direction, which is really good. It just also makes it an interesting proposal in contrast to players like Aaliyah Edwards and Camila Cardoso.
Yeah, thanks for being Locked On Basketball, your first listen every day. Join the team back next week for continued coverage of women's college basketball and the draft. Make your second listen Locked On Sports Today, the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Have a great rest of your weekend, everyone.